This video was brought to you by NordVPN. With the war in Ukraine continuing to rumble along, battle lines are becoming relatively entrenched. And one area where fighting has become particularly established is the area around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest plant in Europe. And, well, military offensives and nuclear power plants don't exactly go well together, with a number of different people warning that the risk of a nuclear disaster is growing ever larger by the day. So in this video, we'll take a look at what's happening in Zaporizhzhia, and just whether Europe might be on the brink of nuclear disaster once again. So, how did we get to this stage? Well, Russian forces managed to capture the plant very, very early on, seizing it at the beginning of March. And the plant, in the eastern city of Zaporizhzhia, has remained under Russian occupation ever since, but is still in operation with oversight from Ukrainian technicians. And while there were some initial concerns surrounding fighting in the vicinity of the plant, these concerns have only grown in recent days and weeks amid renewed fighting. That's because towards the beginning of August, shells hit a high-voltage power line at the plant, forcing operators there to disconnect the reactor from the grid as a precaution. Russia and Ukraine then began accusing each other of shelling the plant, with the Ukrainian president calling the move an open brazen crime and an act of terror. Ukraine's foreign minister went even further, stressing the possible consequences of hitting an operating reactor are equivalent to the use of an atomic bomb. However, Russia's defense ministry claimed the exact opposite, blaming Ukrainian forces for the shelling. Now, fortunately, it wasn't a total disaster when the missile struck, but Ukraine's state-run nuclear energy company claimed that Russian ammunition was being stored very close to highly combustible materials, and that if the ammunition were to be accidentally detonated, there could be a nuclear disaster on the scale of Chernobyl. And that's a bad precedent to look back on, because Chernobyl directly caused the death of over 30 people, and has been linked to thousands of cancer cases in the years following, as well as forcing the evacuation and relocation of hundreds of thousands of people. To this day, the Chernobyl disaster remains one of only 2 incidents to receive a Level 7 classification from the International Nuclear and Radiological Event Scale, or INES, the only other incident being that of Fukushima in 2011. As such, the impact of another disaster on that scale, especially in the context of an ongoing conflict in the area, would be catastrophic. Adding to the gravity of the issue, the Zaporizhzhia plant is also substantially bigger than Chernobyl, having 6 reactors to Chernobyl's 4, and generating 5.7 gigawatts of energy to Chernobyl's 3.5 gigawatts. Although Zaporizhzhia does have a much safer type of nuclear reactor compared to that at Chernobyl. And to be fair, on top of that, we should stress that safety mechanisms have developed since the disaster 36 years ago, with the international community being far more cautious and proactive when it comes to nuclear supervision. In fact, Rafael Grossi, the head of the UN's nuclear agency, has consistently urged both sides to allow IAEA inspectors onto site in a bid to prevent a similar accident from occurring, although this still hasn't happened. This failure to allow international inspection has led Grossi to warn that the situation in Zaporizhzhia is getting worse day by day, and that there's a real risk to public health and the environment. Now, Grossi further reiterated that the IAEA stands ready to provide technical support to prevent a disaster, and that for the sake of protecting people in Ukraine and elsewhere from a potential nuclear incident, we must all set aside our differences and act now. In any case, Ukraine and the world learned valuable lessons from the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl. First and foremost, the buildings that the reactors are housed in are far more robust, and they're reinforced by concrete containers. Professor Claire Corkhill from the University of Sheffield went as far as saying that a plane could fly into those buildings and they wouldn't be damaged. Although others have stressed that each strike on the plant is weakening the structure, and that ultimately the plant wasn't designed with military-grade weapons attacks in mind. So while the Zaporizhzhia plant might be a tougher nut to crack than Chernobyl, it wouldn't be impossible under sustained artillery fire. Regardless, the reactors do have numerous built-in fire defenses and backup generators. In fact, the greater risk isn't what's contained within the reactors, but what was within the reactors, the spent fuel rods. That's because after they've been used up, these rods are put in a cooling pond. And this pond doesn't have the same degree of protection as the reactors themselves. Now, given the highly radioactive nature of the water in these ponds, a missile strike could cause a leak, making the surrounding area inhospitable for years to come. Beyond a nuclear accident, there's also the much greater and more real risk of energy blackouts. That's because if the plant suffers from a direct hit which damages its electricity supply, safety mechanisms are designed to put the plant into a cold shutdown, i.e. shut down the reactors. Now, if all the reactors end up being put into a cold shutdown, well, there'll be no energy being generated, which would plunge millions in Ukraine into darkness. With energy prices already soaring around the world, an even more scarce supply of energy is the last thing that anyone needs. Given the gravity of this situation then, over the weekend, Ukraine's president announced that his troops will now specifically target Russian soldiers who shoot at or from the power plant, and even went on to say that anyone giving orders for attacks on the site should face a trial by an international court. All in all then, a nuclear disaster is, for now at least, a present risk, but thankfully an unlikely one. Current fighting seems to be mainly concentrated in Kherson in the south and Donetsk in the east, and broadly away from the power plant. Both sides have also stressed that they want to avoid a nuclear disaster, and therefore a repeat of Chernobyl. But whether it stays like that is anyone's guess. And it's not just the physical battleground that people are worried about either. Nuclear annihilation is clearly far from ideal, but there are also concerns developing as the war shifts into the online realm, with Russia's misinformation campaigns supposedly fueling the continuation of the war and undermining democracies worldwide. It's understandable then why many people and businesses are concerned about their privacy online, but thankfully, NordVPN is there to help. NordVPN is far more than just a VPN which allows you to encrypt your web traffic. It's a full suite of tools to secure your digital life, from blocking malware and preventing malicious ad trackers to helping you set more secure passwords. And there's fun stuff too, because using NordVPN, you can access the internet through other countries, which means that region-locked content is available to you from anywhere. And as they have over 5,400 servers in 59 different countries, there's a lot of choice. So when you're at home, you can stream movies and films that aren't on your streaming services, and when you're away, you can still log in via your country, preventing all of your apps from freaking out and thinking that you're being hacked. So NordVPN really is an all-in-one security solution. And with the fastest connection of any VPN out there, now's the time to get yourself protected. So if you sign up for a 2-year subscription using our link, you'll not only get a massive discount, but you'll also benefit from their 30-day free trial to give you some peace of mind while you find out how much you love it. Anyway, thanks for your support, and thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring TLDR.